Well, okay, if we're ready, then we'll start a couple minutes early.
Yes, actually 5:16.
Oh, okay. Okay, welcome. We are now at the third round of the Tuesday night marathon.
What first?
And on Sunday, it was the finish of the United States Chess Championship. And probably you all know that Hikaru Nakamura won on the last round, and this is actually the fifth time he's become United States chess champion. The players who lead are Bobby Fischer and Sammy Reshevsky, who won 8 times, and of course we all in the Bay Area know about Walter Brown, Mr. 6-time. So those are the 3 records, but Hikaru is getting up there. The last round was very exciting because there was 3 players in the men's section tied for the lead. It was Hikaru and Fabiano Caruana and our new American Lanier Dominguez, who came from Cuba. And everybody thought Dominguez would win the championship. He was the only player of the 3 to have the white pieces, and he was playing Timur Goreev, who was near the bottom. In fact, Dominguez got a very promising position in that game and had some nice advantage, but couldn't win in the end. He had a knight for a pawn, but his knight was stranded far to the side, and Goreev managed to make a draw and hold it off. Nonetheless, a great debut performance for Lanier Dominguez. Second place, I think it was $35,000. It's very good. And Fabiano Caruana was playing our own Sam Shanklin, the defending champion, but Sam didn't have the magic this year. He finished with an even score, played well, but it just wasn't there. He lost 1, he won 1. Didn't really get going to compete for the first place this year. Hikaru, on the other hand, he started out strong. He was always in the lead or near the lead. And in the last round, he had black against a very strong player, Jeffrey Zhang, who was here to give an exhibition in January. So Jeffrey's one of your tough opponents in the US Championship, and to have black, well, it's not very easy. But Hikaru thought, well, if he wants to be champion, he's got to try to win the game. So Jeffrey starts out with d4, a little unusual for him. And what do you do if you want to win the game? You need some unbalanced position. And Hikaru chose the Dutch defense. A lot of people feel that's a little bit unsound or a little bit shaky, but you definitely get an unbalanced position. There's just no easy trade-off into a slightly better endgame. Black has the king side, you have the queen side. Maybe you have some holes, but you present your opponents with difficult problems. So Jeffrey followed up with the classical response, pawn to c4, which I've seen some other players simply putting the pawn on c3, like Kenkin, and getting some good positions as white. Anyway, you can't fault the classical system. And Hikaru plays the Leningrad variation, where you fianchetto the king's bishop. So the response is to fianchetto white's bishop. Make sure you're well defended on the king side. And both players castle. Pawn to d6. Now Hikaru has played the king's Indian defense. And probably Jeffrey Zhang was well prepared for that. This was a bit of a surprise for him. And you see the black e-pawn is backward, which can be a problem, but how exactly do you take advantage of that? knight c3, knight c6, one of the variations, and Jeffrey goes to immediately displace the knight. Goes knight a5 on the c pawn, which you could answer with knight to d2 to guard it. Jeffrey plays this provocative pawn to b3 on this long diagonal, which, okay, Hikaru could hit him in the center that way. A knight takes the knight. If the pawn takes the knight, white knight comes to d4, blocking the diagonal. You have a terrific game for the white side. You can take the exchange, but there's a couple of good things to do. See this knight stranded out here. You probably could go knight to g5 and you're going to have all the pieces on the king side with the black knight over here. Maybe bishop h6 is also possible. Ready to take on a1. So this would have been very tactical and concrete for the white side. Good compensation for the exchange, and Hikaru simply didn't go for it. He wants to keep the tension for as long as possible, and just played pawn to c5. So his knight's okay over here. Nothing can really attack it. Pawn can go to b6 if necessary. And okay, Jeffrey covers up on the long diagonal, and Hikaru goes for this queenside play, pawn a6, planning to expand on the queen side. Now, what exactly do? You need a plan for white. You should probably try to get pawn to e4 at some point, but he first jumps with the knight to g5, rook to b8 to play pawn to b5, queen d3 prevents pawn to b5, and maybe
Let me do push the e pawn down, supported by the queen and the knight and the bishop.
Immediately, you could do that, getting some action on this side of the board, and that's very principled play. Although black now plays pawn to b5, and you're going to have to deal with the activity on the queen side.
So you could put the queen there on d3 and then do it, right?
That's probably was his idea, to put the queen on d3 and then play pawn to e4. Not sure he's got the best setup, because you have to worry about a bishop coming to f5. Maybe okay. I would have liked the queen better on c2, perhaps even played pawn to a4, trying to restrain the activity there.
Yeah.
Although that can open up more if black does get in pawn to b5. Queen to d3 is all right, though. Kind of a nice move from Hikaru. Queen to e8, and he's got another piece on the b5 square. So Jeffrey sees that move's inevitable, and he repositions his pieces over on the queen side, so he can deal with the pawn to b5 advance. Pawn to b5 happens, and queen d2 attacks the knight on a5. So Hikaru goes back, knight to b7, because the knight doesn't have much future on a5 anyway. And knight e3, which it's good to get the pieces over on this side of the board. I'll repeat that if that eventually you have to do a pawn break if you're going to, you know, make any progress on the king side. You're not going to win on the queen side. This I like from Hikaru. Just now knight to d8. His knight's gone all over the place, but it did its job over here. Now it's coming to help out on the king side. Knight h3. The f4 square is a more secure square than g5, which can always get hit.
Knight f7.
Let's see, knight e3, knight 8, knight 2. Okay, right now he developed the bishop. You know, black doesn't really want to break over here. Black's happy to defend over here and slowly make some progress on the queen side. You're a little loose over here, so you know if you push this up, pawn takes, your squares have become open in the middle and white's pieces can jump in. So maybe you just want to leave this alone over on the king side. And the question is, what is white doing? Rook to d1. If pawn takes c4, you can take with the knight, and that's a nice place for it. You could take with the pawn also. But Hikaru just goes pawn to b4. And that closes everything down, all very solid here. But he's being very patient in this game. And he still has a pawn break on the a file. He gives Jeffrey the question, what are you going to do on the king side? A lot of times when you want to win the game, you give your opponent a lot of options to choose from. And they spend a lot of time, they're thinking what's the best plan. When you give them one clear course of action, it's easy for them to play. Queen c2, pawn to a5, knight to f4, eyeing the e6 square. Hikaru just plays pawn a4. Maybe it doesn't do so much, but you can get an open file. There's some thoughts of pawn to a3 to chase the bishop off the diagonal, although that would lock things up. Pawn to h4. Okay, looks like a useful move, but you don't really want to go pawn to h5, pawn to g5. So again, very patient from Hikaru. Put the rook on the potentially open file. And the b1, stopping the rook invasion on a2. And again, these pieces he just leaves, and rook to a6. Well, the rook's better here off the diagonal, and potential of doubling on that file. Bishop f3, queen f7, and white's been moving his pieces around. Some maneuvering, they guard the light squares, the pawn are guarding the dark squares, and that's all fine. But you haven't made any progress on the king side. So does that mean you just want to sit and wait for black to eventually try to do something on the a file? Well, that's a difficult thing to do, to do nothing and give your opponent a chance to achieve his goal. So best would probably be, again, look for the break pawn to e4, and something like rook to e1, knight to f1, maybe even knight to d2, and pawn to e4. You make a break. You're doing something on that side of the board. it's slow, but see how slow black has been, and what's black going to attack on this side. However, Jeffrey decides to maneuver the knight back to g2. And now Hikaru gets some squares on this side. A nice move, knight to g4. And that allows Jeffrey to take the knight, sort of doubling the pawns on the g file, but see, it's making the light squares a little weak on the king side. So that's quite fair compensation. Black is in fact doing quite well here. So Jeffrey now advances in the center, his extra pawn. And Hikaru has to win this game. He trades the bishops, and maybe I'll take a guess for this move. It's still very slow, strategic. Anyone want to make a guess at what Hikaru played with black here?
G7.
We have a winner. Just contest those important squares and not worrying that it's an endgame. You want to win the game, win the championship, but you play the best move. And this just weakens these squares a little bit. So Jeffrey trades the queens, check, and now you can see trading here that it's a little bit weak over there on the queen side for white. So if you're just going to let black bring his pieces around to attack, it'll be very difficult. And here comes a very nice move from Jeffrey. He charges in the center with pawn to e5. And what's great about that is if you take it, okay, the knight comes back and you've got the two targets, winning your pawn back, getting excellent play. Therefore, Hikaru calmly ignores it. Puts the bishop on a very nice diagonal. And then Jeffrey trades the pawns on d6. Pawn takes. Rook to e1. And now Hikaru plays guy's move, knight to f7, because it's got this nice e5 square it's aiming at. And you see, okay, this is on a white square with the bishop, but these white squares are weak for the knight, and sometimes even the bishop on that diagonal. So there's themes of checkmate too that you're going to have to worry about on the white side.
Gee, it's almost like you planned it.
It's to say he planned it. It's Hikaru's aware of it. He's going with the flow. He's going to take any opportunity that you give him. And Jeffrey just gave him some white squares there. Now, you've got this file, but actually this file and that pawn is more of a worry.
So black is winning now?
Black is better. Black has the advantage, but still material is even. The rook comes to e7, so you take your chance, get active, and king comes to f6. We need a move for white here.
Nick, back a second ago, instead of him playing that idea, knowing that
Rook to
king goes
e7.
f6, is there a shot of just playing like knight e6 and instead of so
Knight e6, you'd have to take it.
right, it's sort of the white squared bishop, which helps his weakness.
Take it, knight comes to e5. It's true, that's something
mean, an unsound idea is probably rook takes d6, rook takes, then, and rook takes knight.
It's a thought to do an exchange sacrifice.
In light of what happened, actually, so.
Yeah, there is this is actually, you're thinking the right way. You need to get some play with the white side. So this is a possibility. In fact,
it also made me wonder, because when I looked at this game earlier, the knight repositioning from g5 to f4 didn't make sense to me at the time, and it, you know, all of the subsequent moves that White made, you know, playing h4, repositioning the other knight, didn't seem to have been blocked by. I couldn't understand why f4 would be a better square than g5. You mentioned when you were looking at the game that, you know, the knight can be kicked from g5, but h6 is usually going to be a weakening move, it seems like. And if it ever does get kicked, you know, until that exchange happens on g4, the knight always is going to have the option to come to h3 and f4 later if it wants to. It seemed like that was kind of two wasted moves.
okay, you're talking 15 moves ago,
Yes.
but I would agree with you. He moved his knights around an awful lot. He didn't pursue a clear course of action, and that can be really good if you're simply, you know, getting a little extra square or something. But Jeffrey didn't really gain anything from those
It
knight
seemed like,
maneuvers.
if anything, a slightly worse.
Yes, he was slightly better before he started maneuvering his knights around so much, and after he did, he was slightly worse. And we got to a very critical point of the game right here. Maybe knight checks, but rook to here, and the king came up to f6, and here's the critical point of the game. Jeffrey moved his rook to b7. And as we see, Black gets a very strong initiative after that. His only hope was, in fact, to do, as you say, and sacrifice the exchange, trying to cause trouble. And if you take it, and then, well, okay, then if the knight goes here, you have knight checks, king takes, you have a fork to win the rook. If the king goes back, well, maybe we're going to e7 right away, or bring the knight right up. But you get a tremendous amount of play for the exchange. And according to the computer and the analysis, Black's still a little better, but it's a lot of play for the white side. And that should be enough to draw, if probably with exact play, or White could even win if Black goes wrong. At least you have a lot of activity, the centralized knight and that pawn on e7. But it's easier to sacrifice other people's material. Yeah, especially after the game. And Jeffrey plays rook here, and I would agree with you, all his knight maneuvers and rook here, he's been a bit tentative the whole game, and that lets Hikaru do his thing. So here, Black is firmly taking over the initiative. Material is all evil, all even. So, Hikaru takes, finally opening something on the queen side, and not rushing for the pawn, but doubling rooks on the A file. And so you've got threats of invasion with the rooks, the knight, the bishop, and this king has to worry. And there's this loose pawn over here. So White has a lot of things to worry about in this position. He tried knight e3. Okay, this rook is over here, so after the exchange, Black will have one rook working against no counterpart.
Seems like you're just wandering around now.
The white side?
Yeah, Yeah, the white side.
Yes, it's hard to find something to hit at.
Yeah.
Okay, you could trade the knight for the bishop, not right now because of the check. But yeah, this knight's not attacking, the pawn's defended. It feels a lot nicer to play the black side.
Yeah.
And the white side just has to worry. A continual worry about it.
That b-pawn is really weak.
Yes. And when that b-pawn goes, it's not that far for that pawn to run for a touchdown.
They could just trade the rooks off right now.
Well, okay, we'll see. King to f1. Still, it's not a pleasant position, but you know, you do whatever you can for your side. Hikaru comes in with the knight. Jeffrey trades the rooks, which was inevitable. And king to e2. So clearly black has the initiative. Things are very good. Hikaru should actually play bishop to e4, and it's a tremendous advantage. The computer has plus 0.3 or something. So he makes a little slip here on the black side, plays knight to f3. Okay, admittedly it's got a threat here, but now Jeffrey takes the bishop. King takes, and king to e3. So still materials even. You're always hoping that you get that pawn while they get your b pawn. Checked. Knight e5 check. Back to a1. e6. h6. And attack the d6 pawn. So Hikaru attacks the b pawn, which once the b pawn goes, the c pawn will also go. So Jeffrey defends, rook checks, king to d1, and he's going to win the f pawn. Still a bad situation, but take the d pawn. So you have a pass pawn. Hikaru takes with check. Back, knight d3 check. You notice the power of the rook on the 7th rank, holding the king here. So there's always possible mating threats later on. And that's the big difference. Why black has the advantage, because the rook, knight, and king have those threats, whereas the black king is safe. So after king back to d1, Hikaru charges in with the king. Yeah, right now there's a threat of king to e3 and rook to d2, checkmate. So some very powerful threats. Knight c7, so you can check with the rook. Knight f2, e1, king d3. And here you have a plan of knight e4 making a mating net, and it hides the kings for any rook checks. So really no good way out at this point. If rook to e6 may be the best move to stop the king there. You don't have to go knight e4, but you can even go knight to h1 on the g pawn, but it also threatens to go checkmate.
That's a cute move.
Yeah. I admit it's the computer's move, but it's a powerful move. And this is probably the best white could have, but it's not good enough. Instead, Jeffrey took the g pawn. Knight e4 threatens the checkmate. King f1 and takes the pawn check. So if king back to e1, you go back to e4 and you won the pawn. There's no good advice in this position. He went king to g1, and well, you see the rook on this square. So now after knight to e2 check, where does the king go? Does king f2, you fork the rook. King f1, you'd have king to e3. He went king h1 and could check, but this is a much nicer move. You use everybody. King to e3. No. So, okay. You could try pawn to d6, and pawn to g3 is about the same. He did rook f6, stopping the king. That's, yes, if pawn to d6, you could simply move over king f3, and the noose is tightened. Pawn to d7, check. Check. The rook takes it. You're going to make a queen, but rook h1 is going to be mate. So Jeffrey stopped the king from coming over, rook f6, but that takes a critical tempo, and then check. It doesn't matter, pawn checks on g3 and there's no good square for the king. King g2, rook g1 check would force the king to h3, so he went there immediately. And rook h3 check, you have your choice of king to g4 and the pawn makes a queen with check, or king back to g2 when it would be checkmate on the move. So Jeffrey simply gave up, and Hikaru was 5-time United States champion. Because Caruana drew and Dominguez drew, they were half a point behind, and you see what
what's Hikaru's rating now?
It's about 2850. He's moved up to number 11 on the world list. Wow. He gained 10 points from this tournament.
You mean 2750?
2750. And Dominguez he's moved up to number 17 in the world. So we've got Caruana, Hikaru, Dominguez, Wesley So, 4 very solid 2750 plus players, and Sam Shankland, around 2720. We're in great shape for the next Olympia.
Way to go.
And it's funny what a tough tournament this is. You know, Sam was, he was just in the middle at 5.5 points. You know, Jeffrey Zhang at 5 points, -1 was his score. Kobian and Lenderman and Gorev. And young Ray Robson was last place at 3.5 points. You know, not so bad, but in this field somebody has to be last, and surprising to see someone in their early 20s at, already going backwards. But it's just because the competition in the US has gotten so fierce. Then we have something special from the women's tournament. You probably know 17-year-old Jennifer Yu won the tournament at 10 points out of 11. An absolutely phenomenal score. And that's the best score in a US championship since some fellow went 11-0 in 1964, I think it was. Bobby Fischer's special, which Rick Sinkfeld will give you $64,000 if you can manage to repeat that. But that was really remarkable for.
Just missed it by 1 point.
Yes. Yes. And she won games against her biggest rivals, which were Anna Zatinska and Irina Krush. Someone asked if Jennifer was the youngest U.S. women's champion, and no, she's actually Irina Krush, who's won the championship 7 times. She first won it when she was 15 years old, 20 years ago. But Jennifer, I remember she's played in some of these World Youth tournaments that I go to coach at. There was one in Durban, South Africa about 5 years ago when Jennifer won a gold medal for girls under 12. So she's been very strong for her age for a long time, but now where age doesn't matter, the unrestricted U.S. Women's Championship. It's amazing she finished ahead of some, couple of grandmasters, men who have the men's title, and some other very strong players. So I'll show the critical game. Actually, at after 10 rounds, Jennifer had 8 points, and Anna Zatinska 7.5, and they were paired with each other. So Anna had the white side and Jennifer the black side. They played a Slav defense. Which this is all theory. I won't be stopping for this. White gets his pawn or her pawn back on c4. Can't be defended easily. The knight takes. Queen c7, and both sides develop. And pawn to e5 is a break in the center right away. So managed to make the break, though you get a bit of a pin on the queen, and that has to be defended. So white may have some slight advantage from the opening, but nothing special at all. Queen gets off of the D line where there'll be a discovery attack. So knight to e4. Nice move. If the knight takes on c, or bishop takes, the queen takes, knight takes, you win the queen on c7. So Jennifer doesn't bother with that and simply develops and gets her king castled. And we have a pretty standard position from this variation of the Slav defense. Now, queen c2 might give white some slight edge. She instead went rook to d4, looks very active, kind of eyeing the bishop. But pawn to a5 holds the bishop firmly on the b4 square. h4, knight c5. And here Anna could probably try a tactic, knight takes, setting up some discovereds. The knight could fork the rook and queen, and then you could discover attack on this queen. Probably gets a slight edge for white, but won't bother going through all these complications. It's another computer line. Well, actually, it would go queen takes c6, and then the queen takes c6, and the pawn takes, and trade the rooks and move your rook out. Slightly better for white. Hard variation to see. So she did instead the sort of safer, okay, just trade the rooks on d8, and then she's able to recapture with the queen. And the knight took on c5, and the bishop took on c5. We get to one of the most critical points of the game. You know, can white simply take on this e5 square and discover on the bishop? And Anna decided she could do it, and she probably should have just retreated. But she took on e5 for the women's championship. You see a good move for the black side?
Bishop takes f2 check.
Very good. Takes on f2 check, anticipating the opening of the f file. And if the king takes, pawn takes e5, just a nice position for black. So Anna decided not to take the bishop and just hide the king in a safe spot. And after the recapture, material is still even, but black has the easier time. Black has very solid pawns everywhere and a safer king. So, trying to trade off the bishops. Keeping the bishops makes it harder for black to infiltrate on the dark squares. Queen d6. Queen c2. So if you take, the rook will come to the b file. Bishop to b3. And she'll probably go to d3. She came back to a sort of passive square. And black is very active in this position. chases away the queen. But you see all these white pieces here on the queen side and all these centralized black pieces. I'm sorry, they repeated the position, and she went back to e7, threatening, soon threatening the king's side. Bishop c3, bishop e3, and bishop d2 would be better, but queen to e1 was the last mistake of the game. I could ask you here, but let's make it a little easier. She did bishop to f2, and queen went to d2. So, for first place, because Jennifer won this game, and then with a round to spare, she was in clear first place, a point and a half ahead of everybody. What's the move for black?
Takes G3.
Easy for you guys. Sacrifice over here. And with the h4 pawn hanging, you have to take it. So what's your follow-up?
Queen C7.
Queen c7, and the king is cut off on the f file, cut off on this diagonal, and there's this white squared bishop to worry about. So king here would actually be checkmate, and yeah, the king had to go there, and bishop came to e6 check, and here Anna gave up. You're just going to run into checkmate over here. And we have a new star in the chess world, 17-year-old Jennifer Yu. I mean, the way she's playing, she could compete for the Women's World Championship in a couple of years. And we have some other things to cover.
Who's training her?
Right now, I don't know. She's had a few coaches, as I said, including me in the past. And that players of that age, they reach a level, they outgrow their coaches that they've been working with since they were young, and maybe she'll get someone like a Kobian to help her. Now, the U.S. Championship was the big news, particularly for us. But who is back in action is that Magnus fellow. There is a super tournament going on in Azerbaijan with Magnus, Dinglerin, Karyakin, Rajabov, Topalov, Anand, Mamedyarov, Giri, Navarro, Grishuk, and Topalov. Oh, did I say him already? Okay. Now, Magnus is in the lead with 2.5 out of 3. And he's done it in his typical Magnus style. Rather than giving you the whole game, I'll give you the position he had against Navarro, where he gradually outplayed him, did win some material, but had to win an endgame. That was a little difficult. Of course, that's the person you want whenever you have an endgame problem. Pawns on c5, king on f4, bishop f3, king g6, rook a3, pawn h4. So it's a little difficult here. If they can get your pawn, it's a draw. And there's this dangerous c pawn that you have to worry about. So Navarro simply advanced the pawn. King on f4, bishop f3, pawn c6, black rook on, if you can see, h3, pawn on h4. Since I expect you all to get to the end game this evening, this is your warm-up. How do you win like Magnus?
Bishop e4?
Okay, white just advanced pawn to c6. Craig, we will call on you to make the defense. If Magnus were playing you, it would not have been so easy. Want to push the pawn? It is black to move. Okay, yes. There's, yeah, pawn to h3.
Doesn't want to go in.
Right. Yeah, it's a no board. Well, we advance, and somehow, okay, you can stop that, but I'm just going to take your pawn, get my bishop against rook, easy draw.
Yeah, but if you take the pawn instead of advancing the pawn is Firmian.
Okay, Renata wants to simply
I mean, not that it will solve anything, because the bishop can move back and forth and can force the thing, but you might be able to keep it there for a while and try to move it on.
very good. Just take away their threats, slow it down, stop them from doing anything, and then make your plan try to work. So, you and Magnus Renata, that was the move. Okay, now this one doesn't work. You simply advance the pawn here. Yes, if you take the pawn, it's check. If you advance the pawn, you're not threatening the queen because you've already put the rook there, so you could already play that move. So Navarra, he okay, Navarra played bishop to d5. And I'll have you finish this. Black to move.
Pawn up?
Pawn up. Thank you, Craig. Yeah, it's sure. Farther away from the king, closer to queenie.
The king can go anywhere because it's over far.
And did king to e5. Ready to get the king to come in, help that pawn, maybe sacrifice the bishop for that. And here Magnus thought a little bit, said, okay, here's a clean win.
Yeah, rook c5.
I'll take Mr. Winslow. Yes, rook to c5.
Yep.
And king d6, very aggressive.
Yes, take it.
Take it with check. And you advance, noticing that you're going to queen with check. So
He's on the wrong side of the pawn to draw.
right, if the king were down here, you would make a draw. But this position, you check. And if my king comes here, yeah, you just stop the king from getting in,
It's not fun anymore.
Yeah.
and that's the end. So Navarra gave up. Now the other great tournament is of course ours, and had a very entertaining game from last week. Jaden Jew against Daniel McKellar.
think I have to tell you, we forgot to replace the battery, so you've actually only got 3 minutes left.
3 minutes, okay, that's fine. We're going to,
The battery's running low.
oh, this clock is slow.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, I thought you meant on the little thing.
3 minutes.
I thought we were talking about the chessboard.
I guess.
We could use the battery on the chessboard. But I will get quickly to the action in this game.
Okay.
D4. Jaden Yu with white, and it is a Slav Marin botanic system that they play into. Pawn to E6, bishop to G5, pawn takes C4 and E4, this very complicated system. Guard the pawn, pawn to E5 with the pin. That Botvinnik investigated 70 years ago. Bishop H4, pawn G5, takes, pawn takes, bishop takes as you're going to win your piece back. Knight D7, pawn takes F6, bishop to B7, and again they investigated this pawn to G3. Kind of looks like a good idea to attack on the long diagonal there. And this is play, this is a move, and then you have to close it down. Control of the center. And here, Daniel says, all right, I'm going to really press it. You know, this diagonal, these center squares, hits that knight on C3. And what do? You get 30 seconds maximum. Not a pawn takes pawn, another guess? Five seconds. Mr. Winslow.
Well, since I brought it up, bishop takes c4 is the only move.
Sacrifice the knight on c3. You have to play with courage in this kind of position. And you're going to threaten takes and takes. It's a terrific attack. So that would have been interesting. He did queen here instead. But the game continued with the attack, threatening checkmates and thing. Castle long, but now take the knight. And knight to d5, and white had a tremendous advantage, actually, winning advantage. Queen came back to d8, and actually if he had pinned immediately, that probably would have ended the game right away. With 1 minute left, I sort of show you what he did. He castled kingside, still good enough to win the game, but bishop takes, rook takes, queen checks, king to c7, rook to d1. In this position, the black king is more exposed, and white has 2, 4, 6, 2 pawns ahead. So this was a winning position. Went on for a little while, but wonderful attacking game from Jaden Yu. And I always enjoy your games, and hope to see some great ones from this round. Thank you.